Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Modern Market. This is our daily show from Monday to Friday at 7 a.m. Eastern Time, 12 p.m. GMT, every day of the week, where we discuss all things to do with the modern market. That is the crypto market, the NFT market, and how to make some or a lot of money in this crypto universe. I'm your host, B-Check. I'm joined by my legendary co-host, Legendary and Sammy. We're going to get into everything going on in the past 24 hours from this market. But before we do that, friends, just a reminder, we do not know anything for sure. This modern market is exceptionally risky. So please do use your own judgment and exercise caution when doing this stuff. This is not financial advice. With that out of the way, Legendary, it is Friday. It is the 5th of April, coming into the weekend. How are you feeling? How are you feeling about today's show?
GM, feeling pretty good. Had a productive morning. Woke up to 200 more gold on Blast from Hyperlock that got distributed to me. So that was a nice W. Right before the show, I was dueling Sammy in Cambria. Also saw Oxy there for the first time.
Nice.
Didn't have time to do a duel with Oxy, unfortunately, but we have to do it sometime after the show. Had a quick one with Apex as well. So it's quite cool to see that activity picking up. They have a new game mode that is releasing tomorrow, actually. So I do know what I'm going to be doing on the weekend.
Sounds pretty fun. Sounds like a pretty fun weekend. Sammy, how have you been feeling? How are you feeling about your weekend plans?
Well, my partner's actually at work, so that's perfect. That means I can degen 24 hours a day. Hope she isn't watching this, but but yeah, no, I've set timers for various things on the weekend for deadlines, and like Chris Legendary says, yeah, I think there's a few things that are coming up that I'm excited about. So yeah, just setting those timers, making sure I hit them.
Interesting. So yeah, we're obviously we're going to try to not entirely pivot into a show that is completely gold obsessed. And we spoke about how the market is fragmenting in different ways. We've obviously taken the gold path. So that's just for people in the audience who are wondering or considering like which direction to go. We're down the gold path. So if you want to be on a different path, I hope you still find the gold path interesting. We'll still try to cover the other paths, but this is just like one of the decisions that we've made, both individually and collectively. So that's just a little bit of insight into how we're thinking about things. Let's get into the headlines. As always, they're in the snapshot up top. Is pinned there. If you do find it bringing you some value today, please do give it a like, just so you know. We're going to be talking about Node Monks and Puppets, the $1 million sweep today. We're going to be talking about Memecoin announcing a co-branded token launchpad with CoinList. These launchpads seem to be all the rage now, a potential big money maker. I want to see what the implications are for that. And also Memecoin entering prominent investors portfolio. Just an extension on the discussion on meme coins, because keep talking about them as some kind of investable asset class now. So I want to touch on that and see what we think there. So let's get into the headlines. I'm going to share it for the people watching in. We're live on X video, live on YouTube too. Let's get into it, starting with some price action. We've got crypto at 67.4K for Bitcoin. That's up 1%. ETH at 3.3. Solana down a few percent at $176. As we said, the headlines are $1 million sweep on Node Monks and Puppets. On the Bitcoin side of things, 2, Memecoin announces co-branded token launchpad. And 3, Memecoin Mutai announces prominent investor Andrew Kang has acquired a strong position in the coin. I wonder whether meme coins, just like companies now, will announce when prominent investors take a position. We're going to be talking about that a little bit more, getting into some notable sales. We've got a CryptoPunk at 54.69 ETH, a Somo monolith selling for 26.9 ETH. I believe that is an NFT from the game, or it's a game related to the Portal team in some way. I'm not 100% sure. That would need to be verified. And a Bored Ape robot selling for 15.28 ETH. Getting into some floor prices, we've got CryptoPunks at 42, Bored Apes down, up 5% at 12.4, Mutants still at 1.9, DGods at 1.4, down 11%, Captains at 3.5, Azuki's at 4.2, Penguins up a few percent at 12.2, Mad Lads at 131 SOL, and Noun's winning bid is at 8.5 ETH. Legendary, that is those are the headlines. That is the price action. Anything catching your eye before we get into the headlines and the bigger discussions for today?
For me, it's definitely the monolith, and also happy to provide a bit more context on that. You said it perfectly. There is an association with the Portal Coin team to the extent that it is the first partner, the first staking partner of Portal Coin when it comes to play Somo and their Somo token launch. Also, they will have their own social farming, SocialFi campaign as well. I think from my understanding that the monolith also serves as a ticket into the currently ongoing private round / KOL round for Somo, which is highly sought after, as it is also done done with Mickey from Arcadia. Arcadia being the team that was highly successful with the Portal Coin sale, involved as an advisor in the recent public sale. So probably one of the most coveted go-to-market / tokenomics, token design agencies right now. And this is why Somo, as well as the monoliths, have been getting quite some attention.
Yeah, excellent additional context. I've got the tweet up on screen as well from the Somo account. Interesting stuff. The relationship with Portal is definitely there. Is this the one, Sammy, you just sent me that one through. Is this the one where they said it's like the new generation Pokemon or something?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I've seen sneak peeks for a while, and there was a lot of stuff being circulated through various back channels. I had no idea what Somo was at the time, but there's obviously a lot of hype that's been circulated. So, and I think just looking at the cute creatures, I suspect it probably is. I don't know too much about it, but just on the price action, I noticed that Creeps is also pumped, and there was an affiliation there with Portal, so maybe there's something to do with that as well. I couldn't see on the Creeps timeline specifically any recent news, but that seems to have gone pretty hard.
It seems
to be like an announcement driven day today. You got Mockaverse up 7 or 8% on that Mocha list stuff. You've got the Overworld Incarnas, which is tightly or close knitly put in with the Xtier airdrop stuff. I think that's been announced, some stuff there, and then Overlord, which I think is probably pretty close to the Portal things, and maybe us talking about Moonbirds yesterday has pumped the price as well. So
I don't know, it's a very small little green section on the Mintify heat map there that we're showing on screen. Really good point to pick out over Creeps. I wanted to touch on that in just a second, but just zooming out a sec, it seems like the Launchpad, like it's not really a meta, but it's just like the way that certain projects are thinking about building this stuff out is having projects and then trying to funnel people to a Launchpad where they're then going to be able to launch more projects. And now people are betting on being able to get access to those projects via the Launchpad. I believe that's a very, very lucrative money-making business. I don't want to misquote Sam NFT Stats from when he was here talking about meme land, but I got the sense that this type of Launchpad was one of what was kind of on their objectives. Sounds like Portal are doing this with Somo. Obviously, Seedify have been doing that and making launching people for some time already. That's been profitable. And it seems like this is another example of that. Legendary, do you want to speak to that Launchpad idea? Like, is this the direction some of the bigger projects are going to go in?
Definitely, yeah. And I've seen it from my perspective of working together with Pixelmon.
Okay.
That they have a lot of partnerships, not even necessarily from the Launchpad perspective, but from the ecosystem token positioning of Mon. And the sentiment that I got from many founders whom I spoke to over the last couple of weeks is that this whole social farming meta has created social pressure in terms of having a certain level of engagement, having a certain level of following, albeit that this is not natural, right? It's not natural to have 1 million views and 3,000 retweets on your post that says this is the end of the thread. Nobody fucking retweets that. But that expectation set and that social metrics have scooted upwards so strongly that now centralized exchanges have started to adjust their KPIs for certain token listings, because everyone is playing that meta, and you need to be able to demonstrate that you can do that to a certain extent as well. Otherwise, your negotiations with exchanges to get listed might get a bit more difficult. And for that reason, I've seen a lot of projects also considering an additional smaller public sale, a community round, to funnel it through a Launchpad that comes with a kind of engagement campaign for them, just so that they can boost their metrics a bit more, to play the game that everyone is playing. Not everyone likes it, but the founders that I've been speaking to are like realistic enough to admit that this is a game that they have to play to a certain extent. So you have this additional component of Launchpads, and obviously you have more competition, because Exterior is essentially a Launchpad. You have CDFI, you will have Mocha. We talked about Stakeland on the show, so there's more and more and more. Then you have all that LBP side of things, liquidity bootstrapping pools and protocols like Fjord and smaller ones. Then you have CoinList, who's been in that game for like years, but is also now expanding a bit into the gaming sector from what I've seen. So this competition is insane. All those different launchpads have different relationships with certain exchanges, centralized exchanges. They have certain other things that they can bring to the table. Then you have market makers who have a different preference set for or against certain launchpads. You have the same with VCs. So as a founder, your launchpad choice becomes a really strategic and complex thing to keep in mind on how to do it or how not to do it.
So do you think launchpads, this is really, really interesting. Do you think one of the reasons that people are able to go the launchpad route is like, if you have managed to get so much engagement via your NFT project, community, whatever, one of the ways to take that, instead of going the token route, well, I mean, a token will probably be part of it. One of the ways to monetize all of that attention and engagement and people who want to make money is to go the launchpad route and bring other people to market and kind of connect people who want to invest in things, but you don't necessarily have more things for them to invest in. But you become the launchpad and then you connect them with other people who need investment. Is this, I mean, maybe you've answered this kind of already, but I'm just wondering if this is like a really natural thing for the biggest communities.
For the biggest communities, absolutely, yes. Like if you are Animoca brands and you have this fantastic network and this very rich investment portfolio, then it makes sense. I find it tough for smaller launch pads or for smaller LBP providers to get started. For them, they really need to be good, in my opinion, at a like small isolated thing that nobody else can really provide, and carve out a niche for themselves if they want to keep up with the big ones who basically can help you with investments, VC, other portfolio companies that might be helpful for you, who have amazing relationships with centralized exchanges. So for them, it's almost, as you said, it's a natural progression to get to that point. For the smaller ones, it's difficult, in my opinion, to scale that beyond a certain set. Like Exterior, for example, has managed to attract quite a few interesting games to that. And I know that Jeremy has fantastic relationships in the gaming ecosystem. But my long-term thought is, and I don't know how they're tackling this and how they're thinking about it, I'm sure they have a plan for that, but how do they scale it from there to basically be able to keep up with the competition, to not lose all the deals to Animoca, beyond the personal relationships that you might have with 4 or 5 AAA or not AAA, with like S-rated or A-rated games in the space that everyone's like hyped for. So that scalability and that positioning is tough as a launchpad provider, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's very, very interesting. I think we're going to dive into it a bit more. Like, we'll get into the Animoca specifics in a second, but there's all kinds of really interesting questions there to ask and to determine what direction we're going. Sammy, do you have a reflection on the Launchpad situation and how people are going that direction before we get there?
Yeah, I think just generally, I mean, the value of a launchpad is effectively in the network and the infrastructure it provides. If you've got any man and his dog really like building a launchpad, a lot of those are going to fail. So I think, I mean, Animoca is in a very good position to do that because of the portfolio companies, the network, the infrastructure, the funding, and Seedify has done pretty well with their gaming stuff. So I think there will be quite a few launchpads that come to market, and maybe there will be a meta of like a range of them coming to market, but I think so many of those are just going to fail. So I think it's just being mindful of that.
Yeah, I think that's fair enough. Okay, what we're going to do before we get to the headlines today is we're going to go through some of the key things that have happened this week and ask Legendary and Sammy what kind of things, whether or to what extent those things are relevant to them, and also which things they'll be focusing on out of those main pieces of news for tomorrow. This information is going to be coming from the Snapshot, which is my weekly newsletter, which goes out every single week on a Friday. It is the 116th edition today. So we're doing it something slightly different. It went out just 20 minutes ago. We're going to look at some of the key things that happened and ask the boys what is going to still be relevant next week. What are the things which you're going to have to keep, like really double down on and think of for the next week? So there's a few bits and pieces that I picked up for this week. One, the wormhole launch, which launched at 15 billion. Actually, interestingly, this has gone down further. So I wrote wormhole launched to 15 billion, but falls to 12 billion. This is now under $1. I remember, Legendary, we were talking literally 2 days ago, or maybe it was even yesterday, I can't remember, but it's just like, this is just a bridge token. This is way too expensive. Now, who knows? Maybe it comes back up, but it seems to be the case, at least for now, that price has gone down. Mad Lads holders, I don't believe, have even got their allocation properly yet. The next thing, CryptoPunks have 100 loans over 100 ETH. Have 100 loans over 40 ETH that expire in the next couple of months. So I wrote a little bit about how there's the danger of CryptoPunks defaulting and that price continuing to come down. Also wrote about Xcopy Flies, that NFT, which turned into a token, and that meta that's happening at the moment. Crypto VC Paradigm in talks to raise over $750 million fund. That was very interesting to us. Node Monks and Puppets bought aggressively in a $1 million sweep, and Franklin Templeton writing a whole paper on ordinals this week. That was pretty interesting. And then finally, we had the BTC ETFs reaching half the size of gold ETFs. Just the fact that that's just absolutely wild. Like, it's absolutely crazy that we're at that number already. And often I've heard a lot of crypto people being like, what? We're only a 2x away. Like, that's just going to get flipped ASAP. So those are a few things on the radar. I wrote about that in the Snapshot, which went out this morning. Legendary, then I'll come to Sammy after. Which of these things to you is something you want to like double down on in terms of your attention in the next week or two?
Me first?
Yes.
Definitely Wormhole, and seeing what they will be doing in terms of the staking, in terms of the further plans for the token. Ever since someone had connected those dots on the timeline, Wormhole, Monad, Wormhole question mark, as there was a Wormhole allocation for the Monad community, and the question is, will it go the other way around? Will Wormhole stakers get a Monad airdrop? Monad is probably some of the things that I'm most excited about for the upcoming future. I know a couple of people also in our Discord have asked what Monad exactly is. Monad is an EVM compatible layer 1 solution that is highly scalable. 10K transactions per second. Is not an L2, it's an L1, but EVM compatible. They had a recent raise, I think in February they raised last year 20 mil, and for comparison, now they're in talks to raise an additional 200 mil in a raise that would be led by Paradigm. So they did scale up massively on that side of things as well. To the extent of my knowledge, that raise is not completed yet. That is still in discussion. Made headlines back in March, so like 2.5 weeks ago. And also very interesting, apart from that Monad component, to see what the Wormhole price, or where it will establish itself, because we spoke about it yesterday for a fair bit, that it is absolutely ridiculously high FTV for a bridge. If we compare it to Hashflow, which is bridging aggregator plus DEX aggregator, and then sits at 400 mil. If we compare to smaller bridges at 50 or 60 mil FTV, and I know that Wormhole has said it's always been more than the bridge, etc. And I also know the difference that they are working across different layer ones. You also connect Aptos, you had connected Terra when that was still a relevant thing, but still it's a very, very high FTV. And I'm interested to see if this will set a precedent for other airdrops on Solana as well, across different categories. So we will have Parcel, we will have Camino and MarginFi, and while they are not bridges, the comparisons are already being made. People are comparing Wormhole to Blast, and I'm making the point, do you really think that Blast will come out at only 20 bill if a bridge is in this market valued at 12 bill? Not always a perfect comparison. Sometimes feels like comparing completely different products, but we love to look at FTVs, and we love to kind of create different tiers of how things should be valued. Like we talked about layer 2 solutions, and if it's or alternative L1s, if they're like somewhat successful, not a completely dead chain, it's weird to see them under 500 mil to $1 billion FTV bracket. And I think we all have like this kind of mental model where like things quote unquote should be, and Wormhole is massively above that threshold or above its bracket. And I'm curious to see if this will impact other valuations, other airdrops going down the road.
Yeah. Interesting stuff. I agree. I think the Blast comparison is actually very, very apt. People are like, wait, if this is going to be this, how do you think? I mean, people were saying almost a conservative one for Blast would be 10 to 15. And it's like, but this is 10 to 15. Like Blast has 10x, 100x even the attention, and just the kind of live attention and capital there is, I think, significantly bigger. So interesting discussion to have, interesting points made. Sammy, what did you think from what aside from Wormhole now? I don't know if you were going to choose that one or any of the others, but what of the other pieces of news is something that you think, right, I really want to double down that or monitor that as we move forward the next week or two?
So just on the other three topics, the flies, so like the Mutatio stuff, I mean, I've sold half my stack and that's just free riding. So I think for me, like it could do well, it might do well, I don't know. I like Xcopy. He's kind of come out and said that there's going to be nothing in the future for this, but it'd be interesting to see if maybe the community takes another stab at creating something else. And then obviously the 404 stuff could be quite interesting. I mean, I personally had the same focus on this, was on the Wormhole stuff as well. I do think that the link to Monad is interesting, but I am concerned that with the VC stuff, if they raise just before the airdrop, similar to Polyhedra, like I think the community might be a little bit disappointed. And if you compare the Wormhole valuation, so say it's 10 billion, I think Polyhedra is 2.6, so you're already looking at a 4x in terms of comparing two different bridges. So maybe Wormhole's still overvalued, I don't know, but it is the main source of traffic through the likes of MyAmbridge to Solana from ETH. So there is that. And if there's a lot of attention on Solana, you have a lot of bridging activity. So, but I will be trying to stake, similar to what Legendary says. So I think there will be benefits. I sold my stash, but I might buy back in. I don't know. And then the other two topics that you mentioned, I think the ETF stuff and the papers that Franklin Templeton writes, I think they're interesting because it's a lot more granular than what I'm used to from institutions. That they spoke about memes, I think last month, ordinals this month. There's not many institutions that are going into that level of granularity. I think Fidelity and Van Eck have talked about Solana and ETH generally in terms of like cash flow valuation models and stuff, but nobody's really digging into the likes of ordinals, the likes of Memecoins and stuff. And that to me is quite interesting. So that's something that I'll be monitoring.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, you come from a traditional finance background as well. How much weight do you put on, particularly when it's like something niche like ordinals, how much weight do you put on the fact that some of these traditional people are starting to write papers on ordinals? Like, is it very significant? Do we actually expect those funds to come in and start buying those particular assets? Because for a long time, I think people in crypto have kind of been like, we're doing our own thing. Yes, it'd be nice if you come to buy our bags, but it's just like ultimately this is a movement that's going to happen maybe with or without you on some level. But how much weight do you attach to these kind of traditional reports? VanEck, as you mentioned, they're in the snapshot as well today. Assessing the value of ETH L2s potentially to be 1 trillion, like relatively soon.
Well,
what's your view on that?
I'd attach pretty high importance to it in terms of validating the industry and seeing that we're trending in the right direction. But I would keep it pretty high level. I wouldn't go into too much detail to suggest that they're going to come in and buy our bags, because I think they do have longer time horizons. They have like quarterly reporting. Decisions don't get made overnight, so it does take time for institutions to make headway. But it's trending in the right direction. And I think it's interesting the point you made about the $1 trillion valuation for L2s. Like, if that's the case, like how many L2s are there going to be? And we're talking about Blast coming out at a 15 billion valuation. Like, surely that has a lot of upside if L2s are supposed to be at $1 trillion valuation in 6 years' time. Now, I don't know if that means that there's going to be thousands of L2s, or whether there'll be hundreds of L2s, or even dozens of L2s that are dominant. But if that's the case, like, you'd expect some of these L2s to be in the hundreds of billions, not just 10. So,
yeah. Interesting stuff. Legendary, you want to come in there?
Yeah, absolutely. On the $1 trillion valuation going forward on L2s, L2s are still super small if you look at the current like status of the market. Look at Avalanche, for example. They do have 50% circulating supply of the token, 16 bill market cap, 32 bill FTV. And if Blast comes out at 15, 20, it's only like basically a 2x away from flipping that FTV. Obviously, the token release schedule probably is going to be a bit more conservative, so they're not going to rank as a top 11 or top 12 coin. I think Avalanche is top 11, but just from an FTV perspective, they would have the potential to basically set a higher bar for where we value L2s and be like one additional stepping stone into that $1 trillion model of L2s. I do think that also with alternative L1s, there's so many blockchains that do amazing things, like Near Protocol, who were leading the number of transactions and also building their own data abstraction layer. Token performance did quite well on that nobody really talks about on the timeline, because like we are very, very focused in our like L2 ETH ecosystem plus BTC plus a bit of Solana, but that's basically it. I've been to an event by BCG, by Boston Consulting Group, that was done together with Near Protocol, and I think they said basically now you have a competition of 300-ish blockchains that are somewhat serious in terms of their size. And their mental model is that there's going to be a massive wave of consolidation and also M&As happening, cross-chain M&As, because with chain abstraction, etc., it will be easier to integrate another blockchain into whatever tech stack that you're building. And obviously, if this is the route that we are going down, you will have fewer but still many L2s that ultimately would have to end up at a higher valuation just because of the purchase history.
Yeah, very interesting. I mean, to that point, and we're going to get into the headlines now, but to that point, one of the other pieces of news in the snapshot is this raise by Ellipsis Labs, which is for 20 mil, I think. We'll touch on it in a second. But interestingly, they had prominent investors from across the spectrum. And I think that's one of the things we're seeing a little bit more now, where someone really prominent from Solana will be investing in the same thing that someone really prominent from ETH is investing in. And I don't know, I feel like it was maybe a little bit siloed before, but people are more willing to try to explore those connections of bringing these things together. We saw Zeus launch yesterday on Solana, and that's like bringing Bitcoin to Solana and figuring that like connection out. So very, very interesting stuff. Happy that we brought that conversation to you guys before we get into the headlines now. But let's do it. We've even got a question about the first headline. Before we get to it, we're going to start with the Bitcoin Ordinals pump. So we have seen yesterday one wallet in particular doing a $1 million sweep of puppets and node monks. This is Tyler sharing the information. Ordinal's well just did a massive puppet sweep. They picked up 26 puppets, driving the floor up from 0.25 BTC to 0.29 BTC. They also picked up 7 node monks, now up 10% to 0.54 BTC. The owner has 17 nodes and 26 puppets. Just taking a look at the various collections on Magic Eden. The interesting point I would make out of this is that the ratio between puppets and node monks had always been about 3. So like you'd have to times three puppets would buy a node monk before. That's closed quite aggressively now, to the point where it's not even 2 anymore. So 0.3 BTC for a puppet, only 0.52 for a node monk. I know you guys are maybe less on the ordinals side, but do you have any reflection on this? Maybe Sammy first. What are you thinking about here when it comes to the sweeping of the puppets and node monks on the same day? Franklin Templeton write the article diving in to ordinals.
Yeah, it's interesting. It'd be interesting to see what the wallets are of Franklin Templeton, to see if they've bought in just to get some exposure. Because I mean, I'm a strong believer that if you don't have skin in the game, it's hard to write about stuff. So I always try and dabble a little bit. So maybe they've bought a few, try and see how hard it is to get into the ecosystem, and then
buy the assets first, though, right? Then publish the paper.
Yeah, maybe there's some restrictions about that. I don't know.
Yeah, potentially.
But yeah, and I think I'm not deep into the ordinals ecosystem, but I think there's a certain level of affordability as well, because if node monks continue to rally upwards, then at some point people are going to be priced out. So they'll start to think, okay, well, what's the next big thing? Let's start buying that up, and then that gets saturated. And I think that's just natural. And we spoke about fungibility with the fly stuff. So obviously Mute.ATO has pretty much done a 2 to 3x because of that fly token. And I think that affordability of buying portions of something or something at a lower valuation kind of pumps the price. You get more people. There's a lower barrier to entry. More people can afford it. So naturally, there's more demand at that level. And that could effectively hit a certain point. And then there might be a new project that comes in, and it just continues as like a cycle. So I think there is a certain element of that.
Yeah, makes sense. Legendary, one final reflection on this. Maybe not specifically even to do with ordinals, but do you think that these two main collections have become so unaffordable? So people who want ordinals exposure, I guess, have two options. If those two things are too unaffordable, bearing in mind, like, they're very expensive now. So do you go for a different ordinal on BTC, or would you try to get exposure to these runes that are coming and like basically like meme coins / these tokens that are going to be more easily tradable on Bitcoin? Like, what do you think the thinking is there if you wanted to get exposure but can't get a puppet or a node monk?
I think it depends where you're coming from. Are you coming from the community side and you want to have your PFP being an ordinal and you want to be part of a community and might want to find a smaller one that also gets good whitelist allocations for upcoming mints? Or is your play more financially driven, and do you think that the runes ecosystem with the memes and airdrops that they've already been getting is the more appealing to you, and obviously doesn't have the visual identification with it? So I think if it has to be an either or, it's going to follow that that thought process. I do think that in terms of the unaffordability, that is true for obviously majority of participants. On the other hand, you still have the narrative of Bitcoin whales when they discover ordinals. That's like that; those floor prices are nothing to them. $1 million sweep that we've seen right now, $1 million is not a lot of money in crypto, and that has moved floor prices up so much that we made it our main headline. I know that $1 million is a lot of money, but from a whale's perspective, it's not, and from a BTC whale's perspective, certainly not. Like, my acquaintances who've bought BTC early are sitting on stacks between 2K to 6, 7, 8, 9K BTC each, and obviously with that you could push those floor prices to absurd levels if you had any interest to do that. Final note, on a personal note, I do lend against 4 Bitcoin puppets on Liquidium. Those loans are about to expire over the next couple of days, and hopefully one of them defaults. I like this defaulting gamble, because then I would be up like 0.1, 0.2-ish BTC on each of the defaults.
So just for people to understand how the loans work, you chose a price on Liquidium that you'd be happy to lend against. A borrower agreed to that with a puppet, and You obviously exchange it, it goes into the smart contract. What roughly was the price of execution that the person wanted the loan at? And I guess with this price pump, that's really good for you as a lender, right? Because it gives you more breathing room. And like, was it closer when you went into the loan? How did it expand? I think this is interesting for people to learn about.
Yeah, I can tell you the exact figures if you give me 1 second, so that I don't make up any numbers. My current loans
Do you know
for
what we'll do,
Puppet
Legendary? We'll let you
are,
take a look at that so you can get it. But Kusho's got his hand raised and
yeah,
is
let's do it.
very knowledgeable on Ordinal. So once you get those numbers ready, let's go to Kusho. Welcome to the stage, my friend. What are your thoughts on the Ordinal sweep and the general state of the market for Ordinals?
Yeah, GM, Bitcoin has always been the big boy market. You know, the big boys, Legendary, B-Check, Sammy, they all play Bitcoin. Funky, they all play Bitcoin. The small boys, Oxy, Crucial, now not so much. Bitcoin is really not, our play field. But I think it's just one of these things where we are gradually starting to see a tier list form, not based on quality, but about like desirability of the community or the art or the inscription or the ordinal on that kind of thing. And on that tier, I think we'll put S class. And for S class, I would say Node Monks, Bitcoin Puppets, Quantum Cards, Taproot Wizards. Then I would say there's an A class, and A class will be like the Wizard of Odds, um, um, Pizza Ninjas, and the like. So it's like a tier list is starting to form gradually. And because there's a lot of people sleeping on Bitcoin with like giant amounts of liquidity, most people are going to be, I mean, those people are going to be playing on like the S tier list, while many other people who just can barely afford to work in Bitcoin can then like go into like the A tier collections that are also very good, by the way. Very good communities, very solid projects that also get a decent amount of whitelist, but they are not like premier collections, so to speak. So it's like CryptoPunks is up there, and then you have like Pudgy Penguins, and then you have like Miladies and Sappy Seals. So that kind of, ranking kind of forming. It's not a very solid ranking, but it's like a mental thing that people have. Like I jump into Ordinals today for the first time. I really want a Node Monk. I can't afford a Node Monk, so I'm going to buy whatever it is that I can afford. And then you have another subset of the market that can't afford to play on Bitcoin at all, simply because 0.004231 Bitcoin is already a shit ton of money. So that kind of thing is starting to form.
A lot of really, really good points there. I think, I mean, the first point on the unit cost, like, yes, even the smallest amount of Bitcoin just always ends up being a lot of money. And you don't even, it's so dangerous that you don't even realize how much money it is sometimes when you're just thinking in Bitcoin terms. Also on the fact that, these tiers are kind of emerging and it's kind of up for grabs on ordinals. Like, yes, you've got really, really strong ones like the ones we just mentioned, also OMB, Quantum Cats and things like that. But then, beyond that, it does feel like there's a bit more space for people to battle it out and form things. Admittedly, we're not the most on top of the ordinals ecosystem, so we're not the best people to comment there, but it feels like something like that. So interesting stuff, Kusho. Let's go back to Legendary. You wanted to maybe do a little bit of an explainer of how the lending practically works with some numbers.
Yep, absolutely. So when I started lending against the puppets, basically my loan to value ratio was around 65-ish%. Each individual loan amount that I gave out was 0.15 BTC. All of them are loans for 12 days. All of them have an APY of 120%. So that will net earn you like almost 2% over that period of 7 days in BTC, which is quite insane. And now with the move upwards, basically that loan to value ratio has gone down to 52%, which has two potential upsides for me. So on the one hand, the price of puppets would have to go down by more than half over the next days for me to actually receive an asset that's less valuable than the collateral that I put up in terms of the 0.15 BTC. If that is the case, if that were the case, then I would be down. And the other options are loan gets repaid either earlier or at the end of the loan earlier, because someone might have seen the pump and they're like, oh, I want to close that loan and sell and take profit. And if they do that, I earn my interest. If they paid back at the end of the loan period, I earn my interest. And if the default, I obviously don't get my 0.15 BTC plus interest back, but I end up with a Bitcoin puppet that, again, at current prices is worth twice the amount of BTC that I have lent out to that person.
So does the interest not accrue evenly? So you'd get all the interest if they decide to pay it back early? Because I know on ETH, like you'd effectively accrue it over time. So you'd only pay. I
don't know, Legendary.
I think that if you pay back early, I think there is some kind of additional fee or additional interest that you pay for that, but I'm not 100% sure because I've never had that happen, and I honestly haven't had a look at the docs on that specifically.
Interesting stuff. So look, I just want to make clear, thank you so much for that. I think that's really, really helpful context for people figuring out, like, look, maybe I can get some exposure to ordinals via this thing. This is the thing. I've lent significantly on ETH for probably a year now, actually. Well, I don't know how long. We've just presented like the best case scenario. Obviously, on top of this, the worst case scenario is you think, oh, it's so good because of all these 3 different reasons. Oh, I'm going to make money via interest. Or if they default, I get to make loads of money, or whatever. But obviously, if that asset collapses for whatever reason, because sometimes they do in this market, then you will be left with a loan that you've given, say, as Legendary said, just as an example, 0.15 BTC, it's gone out. The asset's now worth 0.1. That person probably isn't going to pay you back then by the time the end of the loan hits, which means you're holding a 0.1 asset. You've lost your 0.15. Maybe you can put your 0.1 asset because you ultimately want the Bitcoin. You don't want the asset potentially. And then you make a loss on your Bitcoin. That would be the worst case scenario. Just to articulate that, because sometimes when the market's good, it can look like really, really easy. I obviously did one recently, which I posted about, where the first loan that I ever gave on Bitcoin ended up being for a node monk, and it was a 0.25 BTC profit. So obviously that like makes it sound really rosy and like, oh, you just do this loan, then you end up with 0.25 BTC at the end of it. It's like, okay, it was a little bit lucky. It's the first one I ever did, and the person defaulted. And on top of that, node monks had like retained their price and versus when I gave the loan. So there's all these kind of factors to keep in mind. I want to get into some of the next headlines now. Kusho, you do have your hand raised. I want to give you a chance to come back in for a quick point before we hit the next headlines.
I didn't have a quick point. I did have a question.
Okay.
Which was like, with loans, it's very rare. I mean, it has been rare in my own experience so far for people to like default on loans. How often is it that people default on loans for things like that? I mean, someone defaults on a loan for an asset and, takes away your Bitcoin, the asset is worth much less. What happens, in the event the asset itself then goes back up? Hasn't that person lost as a result of that kind of like, will I say, trying to play it in a very PvP type of way?
Well, I mean, I guess it depends. It depends what they've done with the money, right? Like, so technically it would have made absolutely no sense for this person to not pay his loan back to me, but they might have done something with the money and lost the money. So they might literally not have the money to pay it back. So I assume that's why it doesn't get paid back. In terms of the quantity, I don't know if there's a good place to see that data yet, particularly on Bitcoin. There is a website called Snow Genesis for all of the kind of lending activity. I don't know if it captures all of it on ETH, but that's where I would go to check out the kind of underlying data on ETH. So not a perfect answer for you, Kusho, but that's the best I can do. Before we hit the next headlines, we've got someone new on stage with us. Let's hear from them. XR Penguin, welcome to the stage, my friend. Quantum Cats holder Ordinal Penguin as well. What are your thoughts on this discussion on the Ordinals sweep and the general state of the Ordinals market before we hit the next headline?
Hey, I must admit I'm posing with the with the quantum cat holder. I just forgot to update my my bio.
All good.
completely flipped that. But in terms of Ordinal chat, quantum cats versus node monks versus what was it?
Puppets.
Puppets. Yeah. I don't really have an opinion on the ratio of them, but it does feel to me inevitable that node monkeys goes to multiple Bitcoin, and certainly puppets to 1 Bitcoin. I mean, they're just too strong. The community's been there for like since no one heard of them. You know, like they've been memeing the same way. So I just think those two things feel inevitable to me. And what's interesting about node monkeys is I've been watching them quite closely. And what they're doing, if you have a chart at hand or anyone listening has a chart at hand, is it's repeating this most recent pump where it went to 0.9 is repeating exactly, perfectly, almost perfectly, the first pump that it had when it came out. If you look on the chart, basically, you'll see the first peak in the original pump when it released. Mirrors almost, that's probably the worst part of it. But then from there, the second pump, when it initially came out, exactly mirrors how it came out. So basically, TLDR is if you take, and it's still been following that since it crashed.
TLDR. TLDR.
So the TLDR is, I am anticipating that the
TLDR.
I'm anticipating that it will pump within about 15 days.
Okay.
10 to 15 days, which would be like a 2.5 Bitcoin. So whether that happens first or runes is up for grabs.
Thank you very much for that prediction. Appreciate it. Very, very bullish. I mean, I definitely agree with you in the fact that these two collections seem to have distinguished themselves. We'll have to see on the price action. So thank you for that. Let's get into the Web3 roundup to get everyone up to speed with what else has been happening in the past 24 hours. Then we're going to hit the final headline as always. So as always, it's from the snapshot, which is pinned up top. Let's get into it. So we have a few other pieces of interesting news. We have Ellipsis Labs raising $20 million, led by Paradigm to further the DeFi ecosystem. This is the one I mentioned earlier, with prominent ETH and Sol investors. Number 2, Van Eck predicts ETH L2 tokens will reach 1 trillion in valuation by 2030. We also mentioned that just a little bit ago. This was very cool. Doodles announces storytelling experience with Pharrell Williams and Lil Wayne. They said our first ever animated special will be accompanied by Doodles Records original soundtrack with 3 music videos featuring some of the world's biggest artists. Very cool announcement from them. And next, Athena announces USDE supply hits $2 billion and has onboarded BTC as a backing asset. Final pieces of news, ThreadGuy, we're speaking about Monad. ThreadGuy announces position with Monad. That got everyone on the timeline exceptionally bullish. And finally, the Munchables team on Blast announces that ETH has returned to those affected by the $62 million hack last week. So that was very nice to receive the ETH that I lost. And I've got a sneaky suspicion it would be just like crypto for Munchables thing to like rip now for some reason, like everyone who got affected by the hack. I mean, it's kind of wishful thinking because I'd love it for it to be the case, but it would be some strange irony potentially. But that is the Web3 roundup. We've only got a few minutes left to hit the final headline. Legendary, just like we did yesterday, we've got 2 headlines. Maybe we've spoken a little bit already about the Mockaverse Launchpad collaboration with CoinList, but we've also got this Memecoin announcement where it seems like people are announcing meme coins, investors in meme coins, as if it's like a raise. Where do you want to take the conversation in the final 5 minutes?
Let's go into the meme coin side of things, because I think like from a philosophical standpoint, that might be the more interesting conversation.
Okay, sounds good. And also we've kind of discussed the Launchpad idea, why it's profitable, why it's interesting to people earlier on in the show. So this was the announcement. I'm sharing it for the people watching on video, on X and on YouTube, but I'll read it out for other people. Mutai Memecoin announced this in a significant step forward for Mutai and the Mutai community. We are ridiculously excited to announce that the legendary investor and OG in the space, Andrew Kang, has acquired a strong position in the cultural community coin and meme phenomenon Mutai and has joined the Mutai fund. What does this mean for Mutai, and why are legends like Andrew jumping in? And they kind of go on to write this whole thesis, I guess, on why this coin is such a good coin, why a prominent investor will have jumped in. I really thought this was interesting, though, because of the conversations we've been having recently on meme coins potentially being like this new investable asset, a bucket all on its own, separate to other altcoins and other types of coins that are outside the major coins. And just wanted to ask the question, like, do you think we'll see more of this type of thing? What do you make of this, where there's this type of announcement coming out that, I mean, it basically sounds like, you know, a company saying that they're being backed by Paradigm or something, but it's just a meme coin. So, like, what are your thoughts, Legendary? Then Sammy as well.
I definitely think we're going to see more and more of that for multiple reasons. First of all, competition is intensifying. We've seen it on the gaming side, where suddenly, and as an example I mentioned a couple of times, games start to build their own L2 solutions to be bigger, to stand out from the competition. Similarly, if everyone is doing meme coin, you want to kind of stand out. And then, I mean, interestingly, is it then even a meme anymore if you treat it like a serious company and communicate like that? On the other hand, and that's the second point to it, we already are in a stage where we are watching prominent people either posting about a meme coin, is Ansem posting about their cat, or is, I don't know, is Mooncat buying a specific meme coin and posting that. And if Mooncat is deploying 100 Sol into the duck meme coin, then that might be an investment buy signal for others because Mooncat is in or whatever. So like we are already having those kind of structures and processes. Maybe like we are formalizing them more. And probably the strongest example of that is PackMoon on Blast.
Interesting.
Where it's like literally treated like a company. They have partnerships that they announce with YOLO. You can now wager your PackMoon in YOLO. You can edit in different, I think different other protocols have incentives for dealing with Pack, and they just start to treat it like a company. And then it's interesting. It basically goes back to, you have tokenized attention with a meme coin, and now you're trying to put that to use as if it were a company where what you sell is the attention. Basically, you sell the idea of being able to bring extra attention to YOLO. If people there can wager the Pack and they're like, oh, I'm part of Pack, I can wager that. Let's have a look at what YOLO Games is about. And that there is no product, because it's just, quote unquote, just a meme, apart from the community and the attention. And attention is a very scarce good. So like treating it like a company and taking that seriously makes sense. But like maybe ideologically it moves away from what the core idea of just being a meme coin used to be.
I absolutely love the comparison with PackMoon. Like that's so apt, because it's like a whole strategized plan to like build things together. It's like working with companies, working with the community, blah 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 blah. It's like a whole plan to move this stuff forward. Really, really glad you brought that up, Sammy. Would love to hear your thoughts. Bring us to the conclusion on this point to round up the show.
Yeah, I think, I mean, Vitalik wrote a paper recently on meme coins, and obviously Franklin Templeton wrote that meme coin paper. And I think people are realizing that the attention is incredibly valuable, and actually meme coins are a good way of having that initial capital bootstrap to taking it to the next level. So it's almost like a Trojan horse. It's like, okay, well, this is the funny shit. Let's get the money in. Then let's kind of like use that attention to then build something bigger. And like Legendary said, I think like the transition to that full-blown company, it changes the culture. So maybe it is just that initial capital injection that you need to get it off the ground, because otherwise I think it can be so difficult to raise money with an actual product. So this just kind of gives it a lot more easy. You get the retail money in, it seems to fly, it seems to do pretty well.
Yeah, it is. It's really, really interesting though, because my reflection on it, remember we spoke about this as well when AVAX made their announcement, it must have been a month or two ago now, where they said we are literally going to deploy and invest capital into supporting the meme coin ecosystem. And one of the key questions we had was, can you have the virality and success and enjoyment in a meme coin when it has this corporate aspect to it, like whether it's either backed by this money or whether it's got some strategic plan to take over the masses? Because the reality is, for lots of these meme coins, there is no plan right at the beginning. It just hits a nerve with the community at a particular time, at a particular place, and then kind of builds consensus in this really volatile way. And like this kind of more structured, even like the Pac Moon way, it's like, okay, it's cool, it seems to be working at the moment, but it's definitely different, right? It's very, very different. Sammy, do you want to come back on that?
Yeah, and I think even if you look at the size like a startup versus a mature business, they're very different in culture. And I think this is almost like taking it to a full extreme, like having a culture built around a meme coin that eventually evolves with that business to a bigger size. It's like that is going to change over time. And as you get, like, even if you look at IPO companies, like listed companies, they're going to have governance processes in place. If these initial meme coins become businesses that then end up getting listed on a stock exchange, like, they're going to be so different to what they were from the outset. And probably those objectives and visions would have changed along the way as well. So
yeah, I think that's really, really interesting. Fascinating conversation to end today's show, to end the week of shows. We hope you enjoyed the conversation. As always, just a reminder, friends, we do this every single day, Monday to Friday, 7 a.m. Eastern time, 12 p.m. GMT for 1 hour. We do it live on X, in the spaces that you're in. We do it live on video on YouTube, also on Twitter as well. And we hope you had a good time. Thank you so much for the contributions from my co-hosts, as always, Legendary and Sammy. Thank you to our speakers, Oxy, Funky, and Kusho. And thank you so much for joining us again. We hope to be back with you on Monday next week. Have a wonderful weekend. Take care and goodbye. See you.